Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, and I want to welcome everybody to today's program. Our topic today is software release orchestration and the enterprise, with a case study of how ING streamlined and increased software deployments to twice a day. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick announcements. There'll be a live question and answer session after the presentation, and you can ask a question at any time. If you want, you can, as you see, just navigate to the question box in the control panel, type it in, hit submit, and we'll answer as many as time allows. After that, this session today will be recorded and will be available on demand for you to play over and over again to your heart's content on sdtimes.com. Okay, so for today's program, as we've been reporting in SD Times, enterprises are realizing that doing DevOps right requires a streamlined, continuous delivery pipeline that spans many groups beyond Dev and Ops. Finding a way to automate and control modern DevOps processes while maintaining visibility is a huge challenge. So here to discuss these topics are Andrew Phillips. He's Vice President of DevOps Strategy for Xebia Labs, which is the leading provider of software for continuous delivery and DevOps. Andrew is a cloud service delivery and automation expert and has been part of the shift to more automated application development platforms. He contributes to a number of open source projects, including Apache JClouds, which is a library, and is a co-organizer of the dynamic InfraDays container community events. Also with us today is Andreas Prins. He's team manager at ING, where he coaches and facilitates 3 different DevOps teams to deliver stable, high-quality systems and increase business value. Supporting 5 countries, Andreas and his team use continuous improvement and continuous delivery principles to simplify and automate systems throughout ING. Okay, so without further ado, to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Phillips. Andrew, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thanks to everybody for taking the time to join today, especially those eager birds who joined so early that they saw us fixing the last couple of animations in the presentation and me closing down my email. Very glad to have everybody here today. And I mean, I really want to kind of get out of the way of Andreas' story because I think it's by far, you know, it's really what we're all here to hear about today, including me. I'm very much looking forward to this. And I think that just to set the stage for what we're about to hear, I mean, I think we've all, for the past year or two, you know, we've had enormous amounts of messaging wash over us about, you know, these organizations that manage to change the way they do business, and they're suddenly, you know, 10 times as fast as everybody else, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the big shifts that we've seen over the last, you know, maybe year or so is that the stories have moved from a couple of unicorn companies that, you know, most of us are aware of, the Amazons, the Etsys, the Facebooks, and so on of this world, to companies that are really in our own vertical, that are in our own industry, and that really teach us that these kind of changes, obviously with modifications to adapt to the reality of large enterprise scenarios, are actually possible. And I think, I mean, that's really, you know, if I want to talk about what we do, we feel our task is to provide the kind of software that allows you to connect the dots for continuous delivery in that enterprise environment. I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about the products that we have that do this, and I think we'll be talking about one of them, especially today, XL Release, which is about, you know, orchestrating, getting visibility and control of that end-to-end pipeline. But I mean, I think what I'm really trying to emphasize at this point is that you know, we've seen a lot of discussions about, you know, teams starting from greenfield, building these amazing applications and using, you know, whatever the latest and greatest technology is. Would have been like PaaS a couple of years ago. Now it would be containers. Tomorrow it'll be Lambda or something else. And I think that, you know, those stories are very inspiring and very important. But of course, the reality we see in a lot of enterprise organizations is that, well, you know, it's not all a greenfield environment. You have a lot of existing systems you have to deal with. You have a bunch of teams with the diversity of technologies that they're working with, the diversity of skill levels, experience of this kind of thing. Plus, you have all the other elements of an enterprise environment. You don't just have the technology below that you need to interact with. You have all the process layer at the top. You have program management, portfolio management, release management, change management. You've got security, compliance, auditing, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't just magically go away because you decide to adopt DevOps and continuous delivery. And I think, you know, that doesn't mean to say that we can't have a very hopefully grown-up discussion about how these things need to change in this kind of landscape, and how we can say, change our audit process because we have more automation in place that can make a lot of this stuff more easy to do. Can we optimize for that variable? It also means that we can think about doing release management differently because we suddenly have the tooling in place, as we shall see, I think, in the story today, that allows us to go from planning an enormous release every 6 months to planning quite small releases on a very frequent basis. So there's definitely room for change here. But that room for change, we have to move into that. We have to adapt into that. It's not necessarily a matter of saying, well, tomorrow everything is going to be different. That's not the kind of transition that a lot of organizations are capable of making. And so what we do in this particular area is, our job is to build the software that supports this kind of change, this kind of evolution and continuous improvement by taking into account the realities of working in an enterprise environment. So to take an obvious example, and I think we've heard this all over the landscape, but not necessarily something that everybody puts into practice. DevOps or continuous delivery is about more than just a bunch of techies who are good at all kinds of coding and they can basically make any tool work for them. You've got obviously testing and QA in the mix. You might have security in the mix. You've got networking in the mix. You've got the customer in the mix. All these different communities that need to come to the table to make this end-to-end initiative work. And if you do that, you need some sort of supporting features in the kind of products that you're going to use to make this happen. I'm not going to obviously I don't want to spend time here and going into any detail on that, and I think we'll see some nice examples of that in Andreas' story anyway. But suffice it to say, what we're looking for is to try to put together that software set that supports, as I said, continuous delivery and DevOps in this landscape. Let me just say one final thing specifically about our tooling in the context of financial services. We have a whole bunch of customers in the financial services space, and I think it's a very it's a very interesting space for this kind of movement because it is exactly that combination of pressure from the market in order to do things better, in order to accelerate. I remember we were speaking with one of our other customers, and they were showing us an interesting slide about how the touch points they have with their customers. It used to be 80% of the interactions happened in their bricks and mortar stores, and 20% used to be through the web channel or online. And over the last 3 or 4 years, that trend has dramatically reversed to the point where even though you're a bank, the vast majority of your interactions with your customers are actually happening through your IT systems. So there's, on the one hand, there's the real market pressure there to innovate, to change, to become faster. But there's also the reality of existing enterprise environments. Plus, you have compliance and regulation thrown in on top of that. And I think to see how companies in this particularly complex scenario are able to really dramatically innovate and improve whilst also continuing to check the boxes that they do have to check is incredibly important. It's incredibly motivating, I think. But it's also for us a very good litmus test of whether we are getting our technology right. And so some of the things that we continually do in order to try to make this possible. Yeah, take a simple example. So you have 50 teams right now, and they're building continuous delivery pipelines. How easy is it for you to figure out whether these pipelines meet whatever compliance regulations you have? Take another thing. Yes, you have your mobile teams, you have your web app teams, you have all these kind of groups. But somewhere in your financial services environment, you're very likely to have a mainframe or a transaction processing system or something enormous. And sure, that it's not going to be the first technology that you necessarily try to accelerate dramatically. But very quickly you will find that you have to touch this thing, especially as you start to break out some of this monolithic architecture potentially. And then again, you need tooling that is able to support not just live modern technologies that happen to be trendy today, but that can interface with your mainframe and help do stuff in that area. All right, I mean, enough for me, I think, at this point. Now let's move from the kind of backdrop to the actual real-life story. And with that, over to Andreas, who's going to talk about continuous delivery at ING.
Hi, thank you, Andrew, for giving me the stage. It's really an honor to present the ING story to, well, let's say almost 200 people. So really good to do so and share some of our hurdles we take in the last year and a half. but more or less show us the culture that we have within our teams to realize continuous delivery, and also a bit of the goal and the purpose we use continuous delivery, because as said, continuous delivery for us is not the goal itself, but it's really a way of delivering value to our customers. So today I want to talk a bit about the background of ING and the way we are organized, because that shows some of the complexity we're dealing with. And we go step by step through the story and show how we build up our continuous delivery pipeline and what the next. So there's room for questions, so feel free to ask them, try to answer them all at the end. So for those who are not familiar with ING, when you look to ING, it's the number 9 bank within Europe. So it's really a big company, servicing over more than 33 million customers in more than 40 countries. So it's not that small. We have more than 50,000 employees working within ING in the different countries. And what you see is that the percentage of the people working for ING is growing and growing towards more and more IT people. So what you see within the bank, and I assume it's also within assurance companies, is that the amount of IT people increasing and increasing. And then at the moment in time, I think 4 years ago, the question was, how do we change ING? Because when you look in the Netherlands as an example, we were the latest one with a mobile app on the market. So we were a bit behind. And at that moment, we realized, well, we should speed up the process and speed up innovation to be there in the future. So the big question was, how do you change a big oil tanker like ING moving towards agile and moving towards delivering customer value very fast and quick? And it all started within the IT. And that's very funny to see that the innovation and delivered software really starts within IT. And at the moment in time, I think more than 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, we developed also a new strategy. And also the strategy of ING was very simple. And it helps us as IT guys to really focus on improvements, because this is the whole strategy. And what you see here are all principles where you can say, well, if you want to live these principles, you really need to be agile. If you want to be clear and easy, empowerment, anytime, anywhere, you have to be agile. You have to be flexible and respond towards customer changes or towards market changes. And that was the big challenge for us. So at that moment in time, 2 years ago, the IT management decided for the department where I'm in that we should work with Agile and Scrum. So we came from the CMMI time, and then we switched towards Agile. And this strategy really helps us to focus. For example, if you look in the lower bar, they are the enablers, and in the enablers area, they're simplify and streamline. And by saying simplify and streamline, this really impacted our IT strategy. So what we said is we have to get rid of the whole complex landscape and try to simplify our landscape as well. And because when you look to the lease business, doing leases, let's say you want to lease a truck or a car or a trailer or a forklift or stuff like that, or copier, you can lease it. And what we do within our lease environment, IT environment, is we support the different countries within ING to do lease business. So we have different applications in the front, the portals. We have a services layer handling all those services. We have an engine where we process the contracts, where we do the invoicing and stuff like that. And for sure, we have a data warehouse. And what we said is, if you really want to live the strategy of simplify and streamline, you also have to simplify and streamline your total IT landscape. So it really has nothing to do with continuous delivery, but this is really about the mindset. And we said, well, what we want to offer, so it was in combination with the business, what we want to offer is standard products. And only if we deliver standard products, we can speed up. And we say, well, if we want to deliver standard products, we should build simple services. And at that moment in time, every country who was doing lease has its own services, has its own applications. And we said, no, we should go back to, let's say, the bare minimum and say, well, we can develop shared services that are simple and that are shared across different countries and towards different portals. So we have one service running, used in the Netherlands, used in Belgium, and able to use in all different countries. And that was really a shift of a mindset. And then we say, well, what we also want is a harmonized engine. So not differences in engines per country, but really one harmonized engine. And at that moment, when that is in place, you can rapidly expand to new countries. But this is not the reality. This was the vision we had, let's say, 1.5 years ago. And at that moment, we were delivering software in a way, well, maybe you can recognize it a bit. And when you look to the previous situation, we were using an external supplier to deliver our software, and it took us, let's say, at least 6 months to deliver a new release. What we received from the supplier was really a big black box. We start testing weeks and weeks, and the quality, well, as you can imagine, was very poor. Why? There were no feedback loops towards the customer or towards the guys who were coding. And when we want to go live, we had many incidents, cost us lots of hours to install, and well, we get lots of unpredictable results. And at that moment in time, there was the opportunity to, let's say, partially restart building the whole code base, because the business had a new idea. We said, well, if we take this opportunity to really reinvent the way we deliver software, we can build that up, combined with building new software for the end customer. And we said, well, don't start really with a big continuous delivery pipeline. Don't start with all the tools in place, but really start very small. What is the minimal viable product for the business, but what is the minimal viable product as well for IT? What should we really have in place to deliver coded towards production and do it fast and do it good? And we started, I will show it later, with a very small continuous delivery pipeline. And let's say sprint after sprint, we added functionality. So that's one of my first, well, lessons I learned is not make, let's say, a concept and spend thousands of euros by implementing a full continuous delivery pipeline, but start very small, do it in one sprint, deploy a tool, use it, learn, and improve even further. So we came from the situation that we have deliveries where it cost us 6 months, and at that moment we said, well, we don't like that any longer. If we want to deliver new software, if we want to deliver software that really adds value for the end customer, we want to do it differently. And we said, well, we want to have a team with only dev engineers. We don't want to have ops engineers in our team, guys who deploy the software themselves or guys who maintain the database and stuff like that. We only want to add value. And we said, well, as a statement, we think only dev engineers can create new software and add new pieces towards the software that is in production. And at the same moment, there are a lot of ops activities. So we said, well, if there are operations activities, we have to automate them. So if we have to do an action 2 or 3 times, we definitely automate it and put it into our continuous delivery pipeline. And as you can imagine, working within a big bank, working in more than 40 countries, servicing 33 million customers, well, there are some boundaries within ING as well. We have lots of standards, we have lots of policies, and one way or the other, we have to comply with them. And well, we fully agree that we have to do so. So it's a constant balance between, say, well, how fast can we go, and what are the standards, and do they limit us, or can we, well, change them for the better, and see if we can make use of the standard and deliver very fast to production. And I said, what we choose to do is not to build the continuous delivery pipeline up front. I said, well, this is our pipeline, this is the way we work, but we really start experimenting and building it step by step, let's say, together with our software. And these principles are still in our mind. So if we make choices to improve, or if we have to reflect, let's say in a retrospective from time to time, we look to these starting points and to these elements and see if we, well, still apply to them, and if we have to change it when needed. And then the question is, well, how does our continuous delivery pipeline start? And let me well, use this slide to give some more detail. Where we started is really at the code level. So there was nothing available, and we said, well, we want to have a high code coverage from a unit point of view, and we are building a web services layer, so we have to do API testing there as well. And we started with JUnit, Concordian, and Findbugs to develop proper code. So this was really focused on, let's say, the lower levels, at the code level and the integration level, and not so much on the GUI and stuff like that. And this, from the beginning, we said, well, we want to have a high code coverage, so everything we change should be tested automatically. All the APIs are fully automated. And when you start from scratch, it's much more easy, but also in the existing software that was already in place, we start with these pieces to improve, because this is really fast feedback. When you have this in place, you get feedback, well, let's say in minutes, instead of in weeks or months. So this is crucial to start with. And they will say, well, we need a bit more. We need a kind of, let's say, orchestration. We need a way to store our artifacts, and we want to have more insight into our code coverage, code quality, and stuff like that. So in the build, we said, well, we want to use Jenkins, Maven, Artifactory, and StoreCube. And then, as you can imagine, it became already a bit more complex. And as we are maintaining software, what you see here and what we discovered more than a year ago, having a continuous delivery pipeline is also software. So you have to maintain it very carefully. Be very careful with upgrading the software and be aware of the relations between all those tools within the continuous delivery pipeline. And then we built it even further, because what we had was, well, let's say, automated testing, automated build, but we don't have a mechanism that helps us to deploy the software from environment to environment. So we were still focused on the development environment, but there was no way of automatically promoting software towards the test environment, towards acceptance and production. And at that moment, we look within ING and say, well, what are the standards for deployments? And we said, well, we want to use Nolio because it was the ING standard, and we use Nolio for deployment and promoting the software from development to test all the way to production. And it really speeds up the process, and it helps us to do it more times per month, more times per week, and even more times per day. So having a tool that can deploy software was for us really crucial, and we said, well, let's take the standard as available. And then we started with the investigation and looking to the policies, and what we discovered is that the policy said, well, there should be something in place like secure code review. And we looked to what was available, and there was Fortify available. And what we built in is Fortify within our daily deployment. So at this moment, when code is checked in and when we build something, the security tests are executed there as well. And the developers get instant feedback on how they have coded and how secure it is. So that really helps us to deliver secure software, which is quite important for a bank. But it's having it so early in the process helps us also to, let's say, increase the knowledge level and the awareness of the developers about coding in a secure way, instead of doing, let's say, a secure analysis after 6 months or after a year, like it was before. And as you can imagine, at that moment, and there are some smaller tools around it, it became quite complex to manage the whole thing. And we had all those tools working together, but we don't have at that moment in time, we didn't have at that moment in time a real insight in the productivity or the feedback on, let's say, the continuous delivery pipeline itself. And that's where XRPs helps us to, to get a bit more orchestration on top of what we already had. And I will show you some examples later on. But XL release really helps us to do, let's say, orchestration. And when you look to this overview, I think this is, well, let's say, around a year working on our continuous delivery pipeline. So sprint after sprint, month after month, we add new tools, we add new developments towards a continuous delivery pipeline, or the way we develop software to improve it, to make it more stable, and to grow into a model where we can deliver, well, let's say multiple times per week or per month towards production, but also towards the development and acceptance environments to get feedback. So this is not built in 1 week or 1 month and then start using it, but this is really how we grow into what we have at this moment. And then the latest additions is moving from Git to GitLab. I think you're all familiar with this. And what we also did is we add Docker to our continuous delivery pipeline, because this really helps us to be more flexible in the tools we use and more easily, let's say, share and use our environments. And what we do, for example, is we are running Protractor in a Docker container. And Protractor is a GUI testing tool. So we put Protractor in a Docker container, we put our environment in the Docker container, and Protractor is testing the environment in the other Docker container. So it's really easy to build up a whole environment, and after testing you, let's say, decommission it, you put it away, and you move on. And having Docker in your continuous delivery pipeline, gives us endless opportunities. So we are now working on dashboarding. We put dashboards into Docker containers, but also performance test tools. You can do very early in the process performance testing, every build, or let's say every release towards production. You can say, well, I want to have a performance test there as well to be sure how the performance is. So having Docker in place for us is really the next step, and I think it's running now for 2 months, something like that, and we're just starting. So this is really amazing to work with these new technologies. And again, XO Release is on top of it, and XO Release really did the orchestration and is doing the orchestration. And the question is, why is that so important to have insight in your continuous delivery pipeline? Why not simply having the whole continuous delivery pipeline with all the tools and that's it? And the reason why we are using it is to provide data to improve the development process. So in my opinion, when you look to an agile environment, or let's say an agile IT factory or agile DevOps teams or whatever, it's crucial to have feedback, let's say, about your team, how your team is performing, and you can have this, let's say, from the retrospective, but it's also crucial to have feedback from the end customer by doing lots of deployments per month, and it's crucial to have feedback on your development process. How fast is your development process? I'll show an example later in the presentation. And it's also very crucial to give the team immediate feedback and stimulate the team to take actions time after time. So when the pipeline is visualized, you see where the bottlenecks are, you see where the problems are, and you can improve it. And why is XO Release also helping us is because the deployments we do are always exactly the same. They're of the same quality, they do it in the same way. It's not a manual run book where you can make mistakes or whatever. XO Release is orchestrating the whole process, and it increased really the quality of the releases towards production. So we're using it to release software into production, not only in development and acceptance, but all the way towards production. And at the end, it's very simple. It really helps you to improve the time to market. And when you look to our time to market at this moment, it will cost us 34 minutes to check the code into the development environment, run through all the tests in the development, in the test, in acceptance, all the way to production. So only 34 minutes, and then following the whole process and checking all the boxes that are required within a bank. So from a time to market point of view, this is really useful. So for those who are familiar with XO Release, this is an overview of, let's say, our daily build. And this process is running twice a day, planned or scheduled, and it can run on request, so to say. So what we do is we build, we test the software, and we deploy it towards the development environment, including stubs, and do the testing. And as soon as the developer is checking in the code, well, he gets feedback on the stuff he delivered and the code he built. So this pipeline is not used to promote software all the way. But this is really about the learning feedback loop and the integration of the code that is changed, so the delta on the code, and that is changed to see how it fits in the total package and what the quality is. So also all the API tests, the integration tests with Concordian are executed twice a day, more than 1,000 test cases only for the APIs to get the fast feedback. And this is fully automated. And we have a dashboard running above the head of the teams. And on the dashboard, it's a monitor that you see how successful the deployments are. So when they came in the morning at 7 o'clock, it can be green, it can be red, and then we already have feedback about the deployment of the last or the day before. And as soon as the developers come in, they start fixing it and run it again. So this is really about the learning, about delivering good quality software. And then we have a second release process, and this is the release process that brings the software from, let's say, the local development environment into the central development environment, all the way towards production. And in this process, there's a break. As you can see on the right side, there's a small red bar saying Go Live Quality Gate. So the software is all the way promoted automatically towards acceptance. And at that moment, there's a break. And why is the break there? Because we have to verify it, let's say, with the 4i principle, because, well, we have to comply to those rules. So it's not allowed to promote it with one click to production. So there's a break, and I have to approve the change, and then the automated process will pick it up, and he will automatically put it. You say, well, that's a bit weird. Why saying approved for production if you don't check, let's say, the code quality, or if you don't check if the engineer has built some backdoors into it? So that's really the, let's say, the struggle we are facing at this moment, and we try to solve it in the moment, is how can we get rid of the quality gate that is in the end of the process, and not to get rid of formal approvals, because we really want to comply with the rules we have within ING, but really to understand why should there be a break and solve it in a different way. So there are reviews up front, so you can introduce the 4i principles over there. And we think we can solve this by adding, let's say, acceptance test-driven development, so where the business says, well, up front, specify some cases, and say, well, if you comply to these cases, you can promote the software automatically towards production. And this will help us to speed up the process even further and, well, move towards a deployment per day or even more deployments per day. So this is the whole process. And this is really where we grow into a model from, let's say, 6 months towards 34 minutes. There's security testing, Concordian testing, there are the screens tested, integration test, and, well, this is it. And from time to time, we had changed also our release workflow. So what you will see is within 2 or 3 months, we will have added more blue boxes with more tests, for example, performance testing or whatever, to increase it even further. A couple of slides before, I mentioned continuous improvement and feedback on the release process. And for us, it's show where the bottlenecks are in the process. And this is, for example, the daily build. And what you see here is that the testing phase costs us 50 minutes execute. So when you see the whole process, it's 3 minutes setting up, 6 minutes build, 2 minutes deployment, 1 second verification, and the whole testing phase is 15 minutes. So if you want to speed up the process, well, you have to look first into the test cycle over there and see how you can improve it there. And we say, well, Fortify is the biggest bottleneck, so then you have to start tweaking Fortify, tweaking your security tests, but also API testing takes some time, so we introduced Liquibase to speed up the tests executed by Concordian. Really is improvement. So it really helps you how successful it is to measure the times, the throughput time of the whole process, and see where you can improve. So there are more dashboards in it, but this is just one example where you see, well, it says next focus point, but we are already working on it to bring it even further. So the focus on continuous improvement, in my opinion, is really crucial. It has nothing to do with continuous delivery, nothing to do with agile, but if you want to, well, stay alive in the future within IT, I think having the mindset of continuous improvement is crucial. And well, in my humble opinion, continuous delivery is just a way of delivering software. And yes, it's crucial for us, but it's never, and it will never be the goal. So having continuous delivery is just part of delivering software. It's like an engine. It's not the engine that matters, but it's the way you travel from A to B. And what the team is doing, or the teams are doing, is they keep principles in mind to build a pipeline and reduce the cycle time after time. So the pitfall from time to time is to say, well, we have to improve our continuous delivery pipeline and focus on building the continuous delivery pipeline. But the goal is not to have a perfect continuous delivery pipeline. The goal is to have or to deliver business value or customer value. So that's constantly a principle we have to take in mind. How much time do we want to spend on continuous delivery or improving the process, compared with how much of the time do we want to spend on delivering business value. And we also said, well, we have to work agile. And that's, I think a lot of teams and a lot of companies switch to agile. And at this moment for us, the hardest struggle is to not to deliver the software, but to plan for the future and not to plan on a daily basis and saying, well, at that moment in Q2 we will deliver it, but really having the end state in mind and working towards the agile and yes, being flexible to change from time to time, but also keep an eye on, well, what's the target we are moving to? Because if you understand the target and if you know the target, you can also improve your continuous delivery pipeline. So why do we want to have insight in our pipeline? The reason is because we want to improve it for the better. We want to host and run the codes in multiple countries, so we have to improve it there. So continuous improvement, in my opinion, is maybe even more important than continuous delivery. So then the question is, where are we today? And when you look to the previous situation of 6 months, big black box, 6 weeks of delivery times, many incidents, security was a hurdle. At this moment, we do multiple deliveries towards production in a sprint. Some of them have business impact, others only are on the services level. We work in very small increments, and well, we try to do that. We run at this moment weekly sprints. We try to deliver well, at least every sprint, but we're aiming at more times per sprint. Well, let's set at the go live is just minutes towards deploying software into production and still having predictable results. And XO release really helps us from a process point of view. And when you're working in a bank or a big insurance company, security really was a hurdle and is quite important, or is maybe one of the most important requirements. So as soon as it's part of your continuous delivery pipeline, it's covered there. So then you can focus on delivering business value, good code quality. So what are the factors for us for success? So maybe you're also dealing with a complex environment, and as a coach, but also as a team manager, I always say, well, you have to take time to improve your process. And as long as you're not willing to invest time, yet 10% or 20% of your whole backlog for improvement, well, don't think that you will improve, because planning improvement and doing improvements really cost energy and cost time. So that's where you see also a very close collaboration with the product owner. So the product owner is really aware that if he gives room for the team to improve, at the end it helps him to deliver an even better business value. So time for improvement is crucial, and also the small steps. So don't have the illusion that you can build up the whole continuous delivery pipeline up front, or that you have the idea that you can start automating everything until 100% and then move towards the next phase. Do it step by step. And also see it as a team effort. Continuous delivery is not something of one operations engineer or one specialist, but really try to make it a team effort so that everybody understands it at least, but also that everybody adds value towards continuous delivery. So a couple of guys are maintaining one tool and the other ones are maintaining the other part of the continuous delivery pipeline. And what also gives us really success is the visibility of the pipeline. And I think this is of more importance than you can imagine, because when you have the insight, you can improve. And as said, continuous delivery is not a goal itself, but you should always improve it towards, well, let's say the ultimate state we will never reach. So what we decided to do for our business software, so to say, so the minimal viable product and the product we're delivering towards our end customers, is also the principle we use within our IT teams to develop and improve our continuous delivery pipeline. So thank you. Now it's up to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Let me just rush. Well, first of all, fascinating and an interesting presentation. Of course, I was lucky. I got to kind of get a preview of it, but I hope it's been just as interesting for everybody here. I'm going to rush through the last couple of things briefly because I really want to make some time for questions. And there's just a couple of things I would like to reiterate because they really jumped out at me as being very important takeaways. I think the first one, well, it's interesting and important, I think, to see the pipeline as something that goes beyond production. I know in your diagram you had this measure and improve bit, and I think that's, we're doing this to deliver a better customer experience and more business value, and getting it to production is good, but then we have to figure out whether we're actually delivering the value that we are expecting. And I think it's really important to sort of conceptually see that in the overall diagram, because I know there's a lot of focus typically on improving the process itself, and as you quite rightly said, that is just a means to an end, and if the end is to deliver better software, then we also have to figure out how to make that work. I think another interesting piece was the kind of a smart, sort of almost inversion of concepts where we're talking about your use of Docker. A lot of people obviously focus on containers as something where it makes it easy for you to share your application. But what I thought was very interesting about the approach you mentioned is that it also makes it very easy for you to stand up the surrounding supporting environment. And so, and I think we all know the situation. The performance testing is hard because you need to send an email to the team and book, a week with them in this enormous performance test lab that they have. Irrespective of where your application is running, what virtualization and containers give you, you can stand up your own performance test lab. So it's very interesting to see that all the supporting tooling that we're trying to orchestrate from that pipeline perspective, we can stand that up as needed as well, as opposed to just thinking about standing up instances of our application, which of course is another big benefit. I mean, another one, obviously, I had to smile here because I don't think most of the audience will see that many presentations where one of our competitors gets some good airtime in terms of the logo. Of course, our product XL Deploy competes with CA's Nolio product, but I think that's actually a very, very important and genuine value point here. I mean, as I said at the beginning, our aim is to join the dots here. And I think this is exactly the reality that enterprises are facing. Like, you have a lot of bits, you inherit some of them you made decisions at a certain point in time and so on. You're introducing new ones all the time, as Andreas said. The absolutely critical thing is to have a framework in place that allows you to join those existing dots, and that doesn't come with this, well, if you just get rid of half of the stuff that you have and just adopt this new thing that we've built, then everything will be perfect. I mean, I think to me that is such an important lesson of enterprise reality. And of course, the other side of that particular joining the dots coin that you mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, as you said, for you, this was a sort of 2-year story, a 2-year development. Everybody, much as I would love to promise people, just introduce our tools and tomorrow you'll be deploying in 34 minutes, that's not true, of course. So, you have to prepare yourself that this is a gradual, incremental process, and that maybe the most important thing, as Andreas mentioned, is that you go and get the buy-in from the people whose software you are building or you're building software for, that it's worth it to invest little bits of time to make this process better. Because if you're just willing to see it out, if you like, to invest more than a sprint into it, you can get a really, really tremendous improvement. And that's where, for me, I often think of XO Release as precisely that, not a continuous delivery engine as much as a continuous improvement engine. To some extent, for me, the data that's in there and that it makes visible to you and that gives you access to is as interesting, if not more, than its actual execution capability. Because let's face it, like, things that can call other tools are a dime a dozen. How you use that ability to gradually get better, that's the big thing. Okay, so yeah, you can see all these links, everybody. There's some interesting stuff here. I'm sure there'll be a link to the replay of this webinar as well. I'm not going to go through this. Let me just rush straight to the Q&A because I'd like to make sure we get some stuff in before we wrap up at the top of the hour.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I already received 2 questions, and one of the questions is, how has the change process had to evolve to support rapid deployments? Well, I'll already show us our new, let's say, change process, so the way we deliver the software towards production. And I also briefly mentioned that you have to go into discussions, for example, with your compliance or risk departments to really understand why there should be, let's say, a manual approval to push it to production. And if you really understand why the break is there, you can also improve it. So at this moment, we are discussing with the risk and compliance department how we can change it, because we believe that if we can fix it, we can move even faster. So that's one. Well, how does it change? Well, it goes from days towards, let's say, minutes. And we also believe, and we are at this moment working on it, that this is also of great importance for, let's say, the auditing parties, because, well, at the bank you have from time to time an audit, so you have to prove the evidence, what changes have you executed, what were the test cases, and what was the test effort. And at this moment, this is really our next, well, we are working on it, is to work towards, let's say, automated evidence. So as soon as a deployment is executed in production, that there will be a snapshot of the configuration item, of the test cases, of the evidence, and all those kind of things. And then you can automate also the auditing stuff. And it's a bit hard, and you have to execute many meetings and participate in many meetings and explain it. But this is really, I think, where it's all about. If we want to survive for the future as a bank or an insurance company or governmental IT department, you really have to challenge these questions. Another question is, how many applications are using XO Release? Well, as said, we're not working with, so to say, applications. In a way, we have big applications, so all our services are deployed with XO Release. We try to have as minimum flows as possible, but as you can imagine, there you need a different flow, for example, for Java code than you have for Angular screens. And you need even a different flow for a package you buy from a supplier, because, well, there's no development. So you get an artifact and you start from Artifactory, so to say, all the way towards production. So it depends, and the data warehouse is even even more difficult maybe to do so. So also there you start gradually. And XO release really helps us also to have a overview, because for the Java code it's fully automated, but you can also start with manual tasks. So really make your runbook, your manual runbook visible, and then start automating piece by piece. That's the way I think it can work, and it will work for commercial off the shelf or very complex mainframe stuff. Another question that comes in is, what is the biggest challenge to scale this process to all teams within ING? Yeah, I think that question has many, it's like a diamond, it has many faces, and it really is a diamond. So first of all, to scale it to all the teams, it should be an ING standard, and as you can imagine, that will take some time, because, well, and we're not working in one country having one chief. At the end we have one chief, but all teams in Spain, they are developing in a different way than we do it in the Netherlands. So really scaling towards all the teams is difficult. What helps here in the scaling is that we have something in place. So there's, for example, a business very close to us, but totally different, and they will start, let's say, with a copy of our pipeline and build on top of what we developed even further. So that really helps them to start very quickly, and then other teams can join there as well. And our aim is to solve compliancy and risk stuff, and I think that will help us to adopt continuous delivery even further within ING, because it really proves that you're more compliant and even more in control when it's fully automated with auditing and logging and monitoring on top of it. So, these are some challenges.
I think that's just to jump in on that one, Andreas. I think there's some very, I think it's fascinating what you were describing, and it's obviously a story we've heard a few times. At some point, you have to dare to have this discussion, if you like. You have to go to the compliance or the change or the release people and say, so we understand what you're doing today, but why are we doing this? Because after all, having this meeting, it's not as though the meeting is enshrined in any kind of audit framework anywhere. It's just a way of achieving a particular aim. But it's obviously much easier to start having this discussion. If you kind of don't come with, well, you guys are all useless, we really want to get rid of you, why are you holding us back? Also, if you can come with data to show, this is where we're at right now. We've got to the point where we fixed lots of other problems, and now the change process or the release process or the audit compliance process or whatever, this is the challenge we're facing right now. How can we work together to make this better? And sometimes the answer may be, well, it's difficult to find a way and so on. I think it depends a lot on the situation. Let me just address a couple of questions that have come in that probably a little bit more to me. There's one that I think is related sort of specifically to this. Does XO release prevent overtaking and overwriting? So we do obviously have a permission scheme and structure that allows you to specify that certain things have to happen in the particular place where they happen, and certain people can or cannot make changes to the process as it runs. I think what Andreas was demonstrating is exactly how you would want it to run. It always runs the same every time, and then in fact you don't need to give people permissions to change anything. What we see with organizations that are a little bit further behind, maybe more in the kind of getting started phase, and have more complicated releases where you need to have the ability to say, oh no, the acceptance testing failed, well, let's quickly get the team to rush out a patch and then let's try it again. That kind of stuff. Certain individuals within that organization will have or do have the rights to, say, restart a particular phase. So, again, it's part of this maturity evolution. The faster, the more efficient you get, the less you need to do this kind of stuff. But if you're still moving towards that, you need to have the ability to kind of handle reality, if you like. And there's another one about, somebody mentioned that I showed at the beginning of my presentation a slide with some other products. How do they relate to this, and what do they do in this audit and compliance space? Well, I guess that could be a whole other webinar in itself, and I think we actually have one on that. But long story short, I think some of the challenges that Andreas was talking about are also or can be addressed by tooling. This idea of, for instance, collecting a total evidence base for your audit or for your test verification. Of course, that means that that you need to very quickly be able to collect for your one particular release all the tests that were run. So that's one of the things that TestView is specifically designed to do. I mean, it's not primarily designed with an audit focus in mind, more with an, now let's have a look at all the results and figure out whether we're good enough to go live. But that's one of the challenges in this particular area, in the sense that the more, and we saw in the examples, there's already 4 or 5 different tools in there. The more types of testing and verification you want to add to your process, the more test tools you are going to have. Like, we're not trying to do this all with HPQC anymore, or HPALM. And so you need to have one place where you see all this data in one place. I think another thing that is kind of interesting, and as Andreas was sketching out some of the challenges, the process and the technology looks different as you scale this out to your organization. You've got some people modern stuff, you've got some people doing mainframe stuff, you've got some data warehouse stuff, you might have some big data, some machine learning packages flying around somewhere, you've got some off-the-shelf stuff. You need to be able to handle the diversity of those technology platforms, but you obviously want to have a similar kind of, like, I need to get this version running over here. And so you need to have a deployment tool that does that. Of course, we have one that does that very well for a lot of customers. Let me leave it with that. I think we have a couple more questions, so let me hand over to Andreas. I see there's a few more coming in for him.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the questions is, does ING have mainframe systems? Well, we're a big bank with lots of history, so I think you all know the answer. Yes, we have them. And then the interesting second part of the question is, how do we implement a continuous delivery pipeline in a mainframe environment? I think that's quite a fascinating question. Why? Because it's really all about value. So when you look to a landscape of IT, there's a lot of value in, let's say, deploying multiple times per day from a business value point of view in, let's say, portals or services. But from a business value point of view, there's not so much value in changing 3 times a day the mainframe system. So you really have to determine what brings value there in a mainframe system. So I think the focus on doing reliable releases or stable releases, stuff like that, is of more importance than doing very fast or very often releases. So that also determines the way you set up, in my opinion, the continuous delivery pipeline. Security, from, let's say, a hacker point of view on the web application, is something different than security on a mainframe system. So you choose different tools in those different pipelines, and you will run them in a different frequency. But for sure, starting with continuous delivery really has value. And I think when I look to ING or to other big banks who are running mainframes, well, starting with testing, and we are doing it, really adds value. So hopefully it answers a bit your question. Another question that comes in is, how did you plan and manage the work in the pipeline? When there are changes in the business priority, you will need to be responsive and ensure the correct packages are built and deployed. Yeah, that's true. So I think there are 2 aspects on this question. The first question is about changing business priority. So in my opinion, when you run in sprints of 1 week and you really complete work within a week, you should at least finish the week and then start with a new story or a change priority the week after. Yeah, so it has impact on the long term, but there really makes a difference. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is how do you manage the packages built and deployed? Well, I think that all has to do with how do you work with branches, feature branches, and trunks. How do you push and pull your code and work with that? So that's another webinar there. Well, measuring value is one of the questions. I think I leave that question because that's a whole different story and ballgame. So, well, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Dave, over to you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was excellent. Really informative presentation. I like a case study because it certainly gives people insights into people who are actually trying to implement these things and the problems they came across and the solutions they found. So let me wrap up first by thanking Andrew and Andreas for participating on our webinar today. And, of course, thank you to Zebia Labs for sponsoring this fine event. And, of course, we'd like to thank you, the attendees, for hanging with us during this hour, and we hope you got a lot out of it. Once again, the program will be available for review on demand within the next day or so on sdtimes.com. And I'm Dave Rubenstein. On behalf of everybody here, I'd like to say thank you very much, and until next time, so long.
Thank you.